It's so nice to be together. My name is Reverend Lisa Windsor, and I just welcome everyone in to rest, to open your hearts and minds to a sense of peace, to connect, to come in and feel connected. So, yes, welcome. We are on the theme of honesty this month. And so that's going to be our topic. Honest to God, sincere communication with the divine. Last time we joined, we were talking about radical honesty with discernment. If you haven't seen that, go watch the recording. Honesty, radical honesty with discernment. And one of the things that we have to be so honest about is that the ego's plan doesn't work. The ego's plan doesn't work. And then another way to say that is our plans don't work. Our plans, our solutions, our strategies, our tactics, they don't work. And so there's a huge part of the process on the spiritual journey of just coming to terms honestly with the ego thought system and that it doesn't work. We've been relying on it for our lifetime. Most of us didn't know that there was two thought systems in the mind. And so we relied primarily on the conditioned thought system. So there's a huge just coming to terms, coming to honesty about the ego and about our need for healing the ego. It's not just enough to identify that there's this insane thought system full of darkness, full of judgment in the mind, but that we don't want it anymore, that there has to be another way. So that brings us to a challenge in a way, because A Course in Miracles asks us to be very honest. It calls us to be very honest, but it asks us to express that honesty to God. Honest to God. Now, we're so blessed because to connect with that, we have been given the Holy Spirit and Jesus, the symbols of our amazing, certain, strong inner teachers to be honest too. So we have kind of symbols that are very, very helpful. On the one hand, we have Jesus, our elder brother, and we can think of him, and I think it's very relatable, as a man. Sometimes we'll picture Jesus as a man in our mind, as an elder brother, as a source of comfort. And then we also are given even a more kind of expansive symbol of the Holy Spirit. And over time, that symbol has kind of shifted in my mind. Now it more is representative of a radiant light within my mind. So we have these symbols, Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and we're asked to be honest to God through them. So here's the challenge. Most of us have grown up with some kind of conditioning that says that you do not want to bring your garbage, your darkness, your judgments to God. right? Because in the ego's version of God, God is punishing. God will condemn us. God will judge us. And God is also loving at times as well. But we do hit up against this challenge of showing up honestly with Jesus and the Holy Spirit and bringing to them what we have really been conditioned to hide and suppress away. Especially because we don't want, it's like, don't show it. The ego says, don't show that. Nobody will love you. You will be condemned. You will be alone. And then it takes it to this greater invitation where in A Course in Miracles, Jesus says, God is love, bring it to the love. But we don't trust that to begin with. We don't trust that. There is an enormous amount of resistance for us to show the contents of the mind to the light. Now, the Course speaks about the development of trust, and that really has to do with our ability to bring the darkness to the light, and how that does not happen instantaneously because we're actually terrified to bring it to the light. It happens incrementally in our own readiness. And we're slowly learning the lesson that God is not fearful. God is not here to punish us. None of that. That's the God, that's the making of the ego's God, which doesn't exist, by the way. But that God is this brilliant light, this loving comforter, and that in order to heal and to clear away the ego thought system, we have to bring the darkness to the light. And so this is not conceptual, but we'll talk about it a little bit conceptually to begin with. The concept of confessing, really, it's a sense of confession. That's how I realized that there is merit, there is value to confession, not in the traditional sense of the word, but there is a sense of we have to bring what we are afraid to confess to the light, to God, so that we can heal. And so one of the things that follows with confession is often shame, right? So that confession, I don't know exactly the particulars of it, like in Catholicism, but I believe it's set up in a way, like the safest way possible, that the priest basically is like sworn to secrecy. He can't tell, so that you can actually find a space of safety to bring and confess what in Catholicism you would maybe call your sin. But they're on to something. There doesn't need to be a priest, although sometimes we do join with a mighty companion because there's support that's required. So we don't need a middleman, which is so great. We have Jesus and the Holy Spirit that are the voice for God, the presence of our teachers that are going to receive. And so this is what it kind of can feel like. And I guess that's the challenge I'm saying, like, how good are you? How willing are you to confess all the darkness? How willing are we to bring it to the light? And now Jesus and the Holy Spirit have this incredible convincing job to say, you are safe to be honest with us, that the divine is here. The divine presence is completely receptive to anything that you would bring. And that actually, as it comes into the light, it will be transformed and sorted out and cleared away. Right? What is true is held forever and eternal and kept for us, and what is false will dissolve and disappear. So I would say that conceptually, we can talk about honest to God, being honest, but then experientially, this is a daily practice. And it really has to do with the practice of true forgiveness in the Course. Josine, you have a question?
Yes. I think there's I don't know, a ceremony that's missing in the ceremonies, that you teach around confession. It isn't in there, but I think it's like a truth telling. And I think of it like when 12 steppers do their fifth step, which is their inventory, and they have to tell it to God, to themselves, and another human being. That often the other human being will be a priest, because I think priests are sworn to secrecy, where mandated reporters have to, like psychotherapists and stuff like that, have to tell in a court of law what they heard, where priests don't have to, I believe, unless they've somehow the government has interrupted that. But I think priests have like that sanctified role. But I think when I think of Jesus's work, and I just want to toss this off you, when he would purge people of demons, I think what he was really doing was the purification process before the miracle, and then the miracle would happen, and they'd be, they'd get to their true selves. And so it was just like a confession he got. So it was a truth telling where they got to be honest about that this wasn't truly who they were, and come to the honesty of who they really were. And then that was the miracle and the purification all in one. So just your thoughts around that?
Well, my thoughts about it is it's in our practice, it's kind of flipped, where it's the onus is on us to clear it and to release it. So in those, it's sort of like in those examples, it seems kind of flipped, where Jesus is doing the purifying for them, almost like pulling the confession out, as opposed to where we're coming honestly, willingly to lift the confession to him. That's kind of what it is in the Course in Miracles. That's the request. And I'm not saying it can't in some like instances go both ways in terms of like all the examples of how healing occurs. But I would say that, yeah, that's the purification. That's kind of showing it in a different ordering. But in A Course in Miracles, it's very clear in the forgiveness process that we have to come to terms with, we have to come to terms and be totally accountable for our state of mind, meaning we identify the problem is not external, it's in our mind. The problem is the ego thought system running in our mind, and that it's our part to release it. And the Course is quite clear about that Jesus and Holy Spirit cannot come down into our minds and take anything that we do not lift to them. That's not in accordance with our free will. So in this honesty process, this part, and it's twofold to me. The first part is kind of first coming to terms and honest with ourselves. I'm holding something. I'm upset. I don't like where I'm at. I'm controlling. And then the second part of the honesty, that's sort of what we were talking about last time, is like, are we willing to look at the ego isn't working and it's running in the mind? And then we come here and it's like, how do we express that honestly to the divine? How do we bring the darkness to the light? Honestly. And there's a quote in the Course, and it says, it was just talking about one of the lesson practices, and it says this: the exercises for today require much more honesty than you are accustomed to using. Right? Because we're not so accustomed to using a whole lot of honesty. Although we get really trained at it over time. And so what I want to say, because we talk about the concept of that confession, of that release, of that clearing, of that purification, what does that feel like? What does that look like? What is that experience internally? And it begins with the check-in. Okay, like we cannot be honest keeping our awareness and our attention on the externals. No matter what's going on, you're not going to be able to connect honestly until you turn within and check in with what's happening. That's why even in our opening prayer, we're practicing. Check the physical body, what's happening. Have you ever come to that awareness where you've checked in with yourself? Maybe you've been like racing through your day and you check in with yourself and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry, or I'm so tired. But you didn't notice. You hadn't paused, stopped, checked, nothing. And then you kind of, oh, that's what's going on, right? So just those check-ins emotionally, how difficult is it for us to answer the question, how do I feel? If we could take little children, and it's happening, teaching that emotional connectedness, that emotional intelligence, giving the words that we need to identify the feelings that we're having. Besides, in our culture, and I still do it, how are you? Fine, fine. It's just like, that's not what we're talking about. It's a deep breath check-in. How am I feeling? Then you notice, oh my gosh, I feel anxious. Oh, I feel peace. Oh, I'm feeling really irritated right now. But you don't know unless something wakes you to check in honestly. And sometimes I have one friend and she says, how are you? And then I'm like, I often will say, hold on, I have no idea. I need a minute. Like, and then I'm turned in and I'm like, okay, I'm checking. How am I? Where am I? What's happening? Okay, landing. But she has that tone, right? She's like, how are you? Like, I'm seriously asking the question for real. How are you? Ooh, that just pauses. That stops me. I need an honest look. Can I sort it out without taking the pause, the breath? Nope, can't. I got to turn my attention, my mind, my awareness inward and ask and check. How do we even recognize when an upset happens, when something comes along to trigger us, if we don't pay attention to internally what's kind of going on? We get really caught in it really quickly if we're not paying attention internally in that honest kind of space. And what's so beautiful, I just want to say this to you all, at any point in the day, in any moment, we can do an honest check-in and check how we are. And A Course in Miracles is so brilliant because in our lesson practices, it's exactly what it's asking us. It's like, stop every 30 minutes, say your lesson. But what it's really saying is check in, start there. Are you aware of yourself? Do you know, where are you? Where are you located? Are you in peace? Are you in alignment? Are you in fear? Are you caught? Are you caught in the ego? Can you be honest? Can you be honest? So the experience is, I am willing to bring in the attribute of honesty into my heart, into my mind, and I'm willing to join with the Holy Spirit and Jesus and ask them, teach me honesty. Teach me honesty. What happens when we are in alignment with spirit, when we are in alignment with love and the voice for love, is we are honest. Alignment, it's just as it sounds. Everything lines up. In the Course, in the manual for teachers, when it talks about the characteristics of God's teachers, it's talking about honesty in the sense of the advanced teacher of God. That's what it's sort of defining in that section. And it's saying that honesty is consistency in thought, word, and deed. Honesty is consistency, because when we align with the Holy Spirit as our guide, when Jesus and Holy Spirit are in charge, then the thoughts that we think and the words that we speak and the actions that we perform and the perceptions that we have are consistent with each other. They're all consistent. That's honest. So an advanced teacher of God is going to be living in a space of honesty because they're in alignment. And so it's kind of beautiful, because I'm like, wow, how do we get to true honesty? How do we get to that consistency? Well, we get there kind of through the messy honesty of bringing what we've held deceptively. We're deceiving ourselves, of course. Deceiving ourselves, believing we're separate. Deceiving each other, strengthening separation. What we've held deceptively, and now we're like honestly starting to root. It's coming from the roots. It's coming to the surface. And we're going, one, honestly, I don't want this anymore. And two, honestly, I am willing to out it to the light so that it can heal. I have to out it. I have to be the one that brings it out and speak it out and express it out and write it out and think it out. I have to be willing. So that honesty that the Course speaks about with the advanced teacher is the experience we have when we're living at peace and the ego is, for the most part, undone, and you're just consistent. Thought, word, and deed. It all lines up, the beautiful flow. And then again, well, how do we get to honesty? True honesty. We start very practically. Very, very practically. Honestly, my mind is full of fear. Honestly, I do not want it. Honestly, I'm open to another way of seeing, and I'm willing to bring it to the light for forgiveness. I want to also share something about honesty that I found in terms of the confession or the expression to God. And I will say, and I hope you can hear this. This has been my experience. When there is something that I need to express or confess, it's not me who orchestrates that expression or decides that I need it to go a certain way. In the divine plan, the people show up that we need to hold the space for certain things that need expression. It's as if the Holy Spirit knows what needs lots of support. So some things we're going to bring to Jesus and Holy Spirit directly. We're going to be in our minds, we'll be in our journals, we'll be expressing, we'll be sharing, we'll be willing. And other things will be so difficult to speak, to express, that we're often given a loving, mighty companion, a loving friend who will not judge, someone that can just love us through that. But it's not for us to orchestrate that. It just happens in the flow, in the divine guidance. And I'm not sure. It's so beautiful. It just feels like, yes, I've always been taken care of around this. Like I can feel it. I can almost feel it if I'm being honest. It's like I need support. I can feel I need support. I need someone. I need some support. And sometimes I feel like I know I'm guided. I know who to ask. I know I can call this person. Or in the experience of joining with someone, it starts to bump to the surface. Like the Spirit's alerting us. Oh, talk about this, share about this. So I just want you to know you're so cared for in those challenging places, especially the places with shame. that you will ultimately be given the most loving, safe spaces, those real safe spaces to bring what needs to be brought. And I'm always so grateful for that. And then the other thing that I want to touch upon in my experience is that when I have been so honest about, and especially about the things I'm the most afraid to be honest about, the things where the ego threatens me so deeply, you will lose everything. You will lose your reputation. You will be condemned. You will be killed. You will be hurt. You will be judged. These things that are so difficult to speak out, to share. When I have done it, and many, many times it's happened in all kinds of forms, I have felt liberated. Liberated. Because that ego threat to not tell, to not express, to not share, it's the ego's fleeting attempt to hold, to have us hold grievances. And we know, and we're learning in our willingness to be honest to God, that our liberation, our freedom lies on the other side. And what also has been so beautiful is, sometimes I use this example when I used to always be like, well, I'm not a jealous person. I'm not a jealous person. I used to say that. And to be honest, I didn't really feel like a jealous person. I didn't feel very connected to the experience of jealousy. But then one day, jealousy roared up in my experience so viciously, so intensely. It was like poison running through my veins. It was so intense. And I was a jealous person. I felt the jealousy, the experience of that. And I was given the space to tell, to express, to share, to out it, to get it out, to look at it. And it was so cool because it was so, like I was saying, so freeing and so liberating that I never had to again be like, I'm not a jealous person. And I also never had to be again, I'm a jealous person. I just had this allowance that whatever wanted to surface in my experience was welcome. So there's a welcoming that goes on when we're willing to be honest. All of a sudden, things that we've suppressed, aspects of our personality, aspects of the ego, the ego says, it's jealous, it's greedy, it's arrogant, it's ambitious, it's all kinds of things. The ego has its own form of confidence. It's got all the things. And in the forgiveness and the honesty, one of the things that Jesus and the Holy Spirit are teaching us is that because we all share the ego, we all share all of the attributes in some way, shape, or form of its outpicturing, which means that we no longer have to be like worried, to be honest. We don't have to fear things coming to surface. We're learning to be fearless and honest and willing to share and to confess. The Holy Spirit says, bring me anything that would hurt you, anything that would scare you, anything that would limit you, anything. And so I love the experience of being able to come to God honestly, to the divine, to the light, and pour my heart out and just bring it. And after a while, everyone, it gets easier. It gets easier because our trust, it increases so much that we realize that it's safe. It's safe to be honest. It's safe to express. And we also realize that on the other side of this honesty, on the other side of this expression is a miracle. And that's the liberation. That's the freedom. Those are miracles. Those are the gifts of God that come. So we have we have such a important part in God's plan because we are committed to bringing the darkness that surfaces in our mind to the light of truth. And you cannot pass through that transition without honesty. And then we become more and more honest, more and more transparent. And then ultimately, Jesus points to this experience of honesty for an advanced teacher of God. Honesty is consistency in thought, word, and deed. And he says, you have no challenges anymore from that place. There's no conflict. It's all resolved. It's all been cleared away. And so we rest there in God's love consistently. So thank you for just your presence and your listening. And I want to encourage you to practice honesty, but I'm still talking about honesty with discernment. The ego likes to get onto these things and says, oh, you should be telling someone, confessing that, bringing that. You need to actually be present with it and know that guidance will come in to direct your expression. It will come in. Sometimes we journal. Sometimes we just have the thoughts and we think in our mind, we connect with Jesus and Holy Spirit in our minds. Sometimes we are guided to talk to someone. Sometimes we write it down and we write an email and we share it with someone. It's guided and directed. So in this place, we bring our willingness, we bring our honesty, and then we listen and follow so that we don't end up hurting ourselves. I really have a lot of compassion and kindness and care around the topic of honesty, because I do believe that the ego will take it to an extreme and have us confessing and have us doing it in a way that's not in alignment with love. And then we get reflections that shame gets really reflected and that fear gets reflected, and that is not the purpose. So go be mindful, go slow, be attentive to the guidance around it. And at the very least, you can bring it directly to Holy Spirit and Jesus. And if there's aspects of it that haven't been released because you need some support, the support will always come in perfect timing, always, with your readiness and your willingness. And then you get to collect and experience all the miracles. Right? And so honesty, we're talking about honesty in a safe and loving, it's a safe and loving act that we're talking about. Clear the darkness, open to the light, receive the gifts of God.